The PSP had been out for almost 5 years at this point, and was deeply entrenched in a console war against the Nintendo DS. And while Nintendo maintained market dominance, the PSP performed well enough to remain relevant. So why on earth, at this stage of its life cycle, did Sony decide the PSP needed to undergo one of the most dramatic redesigns in gaming console history? Let's talk about it. The year was 2009. The Appleification of trendy electronics was in full effect, and smartphones with their flip-up QWERTY keyboards were all the rage. We were also in the early stages of a bit of a digital renaissance. Companies were starting to experiment with moving away from physical media platforms over to more digital platforms. For the first time ever, we started to see Netflix digital subscriptions outpace their DVD rentals, and the smartphones of the time period heavily utilized their digital marketplace. Applications, music, and even videos could all be purchased on these digital marketplaces. Sony wanted in on this market, realizing that an all-digital future was on the horizon. But they didn't want to go in full force to the point where they would be in direct competition with Apple. They knew that at this point in time, that would be a losing battle. So instead, they decided to dip a toe in the water with an already existing gadget altered to meet the trends of the changing market. Their answer was the PSP Go, an all-digital version of the PSP with a more portable, more stylish design in line with the popular electronics of that era. It was also an interesting way for Sony to combat piracy. Piracy was an issue Sony was dealing with ever since the first year the PSP was released. The type of chipset and motherboard used in the PSP Go made it impossible to mod and pirate for, at least for a little while. The console's design was this stylish little oval with a flip-up lever revealing the face buttons and analog nub. It had 4 face buttons, a directional pad, a start and select, and a joystick, just like previous PSP models. It also had a built-in microphone, just like the PSP 3000 model. Over on the bottom, it had a 3.5mm headphone jack, and Sony ditched the use of the mini USB port in favor of this proprietary charging and data transfer cable. There was really no increase in transfer speeds or charge time. It was just simply more expensive and a bigger pain in the ass to find in the event that your cable got damaged or lost and needed to be replaced. This would be a reoccurring theme with this handheld. Topside, you have the volume up and down, the screen brightness adjustment, the musical preset button, and 2 shoulder buttons that are surprisingly really well positioned and actually comfortable to use. Over on its back, the main thing you'll notice is the absence of a UMD drive. Like I previously stated, this was an all-digital version of the handheld. But it did have this nice glossy metallic finish. That counts for something. Over on the one side, you have the wireless switch and the Sony Magic Gate that uses the infamous Sony M2 memory stick. If you've never heard of it, don't worry, you're not alone. This was once again a more proprietary feature that Sony tried to shove down everyone's throats. There's an argument to be made as to how much faster the M2 memory was, but there's nothing conclusively stating it's actually better. It is, however, more expensive and less readily available than the Memory Stick Pro Duo. The screen quality was on par with that of the PSP 3000, so you did get a really good quality image. The only drawback was it was actually smaller, coming in at 3.8 inches versus the 4.3 inch display that was on the other PSP models. And the battery life actually went down. The PSP Go would only give you 3 to 5 hours of playtime versus the 4 to 6 hours you would get on the other PSP models. Which is crazy to me because it's not like this thing had a UMD drive grinding away, burning up all of your battery life while you were playing. On top of that, internet speeds were still in a bit of a transitional period, and were still pretty slow. Even with good internet, it would still take about a half an hour to download 1 gigabyte, and most AAA PSP games could be 2 gigabytes or more. So that means when you were ready to buy a new game, you would probably have to plug this thing in and set it down somewhere for about an hour. The internet speeds of the world just weren't ready for a digital download only handheld. And to top it all off, the PSP Go came with a price tag of $249 US. At this point in time, you would frequently see PSP 1000 or 2000 models go on sale for $129, which was damn near half the price of the PSP Go. So despite being more trendy, as a game console, it was actually worse than other PSP models in ways that mattered most to gamers. But it wasn't all bad. There were actually some cool things the Go could do better than its other PSP counterparts. For starters, it was probably the best at making Skype calls. Just the overall design and the built-in microphone made for a much more cleaner Skype experience. Any of the streaming features, such as the remote play with the PS3, the internet radio, or if anyone was lucky enough to have a location-free base station, all seemed to work better with the PSP Go. And in case you're wondering what a location-free player is, it's basically a early, more primitive version of a Slingbox that was developed by Sony. It had a more refined web browser and PlayStation Store experience, which is pretty pointless now because this thing will not connect to modern Wi-Fi. And it had 16 gigabytes of internal storage, which was a pretty decent amount for 2009. So despite using that shitty M2 memory stick, that was pretty much negated with the 16 gigabytes of internal storage. And arguably the best feature of the PSP Go was its ability to connect to a PlayStation 3 controller via Bluetooth and use it as an external gamepad. This combined with the external display cables made the PSP Go essentially a Switch before the Switch. You could connect your PSP Go to a TV and play it in this quasi-console mode, which was really cool for the time period. Of course, it was far from perfect. You may encounter some scaling issues depending on what game you're playing, but nonetheless, it was still an awesome feature that they included with the Go. With the higher asking price and lacking features of the other models, the PSP Go did not sell well. It sold only about 2 million units. The fact that it was a stripped down version of the handheld and came out so late in the PSP's life cycle pretty much set it up for failure from the start. And it kind of became one of those luxury electronics, like the Game Boy Micro or one of those specialty iPods. Ironically, the PSP Go has become a favorite among collectors and enthusiasts. It didn't take long at all for the community to figure out a way to mod the handheld, and with its 16 gigabytes of internal storage and ability to be paired with a PS3 controller, made this thing an absolute beast once a custom firmware was installed. Although it was a failure by Sony standards, it's become a coveted piece of tech for most collectors, and has become one of those unicorn electronics where if you see one in the wild, you should probably pick it up. Not to mention, we would continue to see the PSP Go's influence in future Sony projects for years to come. As crazy as the PSP Go was, it wouldn't be Sony's last redesign of the handheld. 2 years later, Sony would do a complete 180 and make the exact opposite version of the PSP that was a physical media only handheld. If you want to know more about that one, click on the video that pops up on the screen. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Until next time, this is Ness, signing out.